Hello and welcome to ROPORTAJ. This is Daanish bin Nabi. In today's segment of ROPORTAJ, I am joined by political scientist and author Dr. Christopher Snedden to talk about his book Understanding Kashmir and Kashmiris, which is published by Speaking Tiger. It's a must read book for everyone to understand what has happened in 1947 and to understand Kashmir dispute as a whole. It's an important read as far as Kashmir is concerned. Let's go to Mr. Snedden and talk to him. Dr. Snedden, I just want to understand from you, why did the British not annex Kashmir directly? Why did they rule over Kashmir indirectly through Dogras?
Well, in 1846, when they first defeated the Sikhs, two things happened. They knew very little about Kashmir. There'd hardly been any Britishers ever go to Kashmir, so they didn't know what they were announcing. And the second thing was they were still strategically vulnerable, and they didn't feel that they could actually annex Jammu and Kashmir because they were still trying to digest Punjab, and remembering that they fought again in 1849 and defeated the Sikhs a second time, then they may have been able to go into Kashmir. But in those days, they just didn't know enough about it, and they were not strategically in a position to be able to do it. And the third factor, I suppose, too, is that there were people in the Kashmir Valley who didn't want the Dogras to be there. So if they didn't want the Dogras to be there, perhaps they didn't also want the British, although that wasn't known then at the time.
And what was the Russian factor in all this great game? They were a bit apprehensive about that Russians would, USSR rather, would invade India.
Well, it wasn't the USSR until 1922. Yes, initially they were concerned that it was Napoleon who was going to invade India. And in the early 1800s, the British were very concerned about Napoleon and his efforts. And one of the Russian Tsars, Paul, actually committed troops to go with Napoleon to India. Paul only lasted for about 5 years, and then he lost power, and then they changed the policy. But the British were always concerned about the Russians, particularly from about the 1850s on. After the Crimean War, the British and the French made it very clear to the Russians that they couldn't head south to the very significant city of Constantinople, as it was, now Istanbul, the Byzantine capital, which had always been something very close to the Russians' heart. So instead, the Russians moved into what we now call Central Asia. And that's when this great game started, and the British and the Russians became concerned about places like Afghanistan, and both wanting to have the strategic advantage over the other. And that's in 1846, though, that really wasn't an issue for the British. They weren't concerned about the Russians in those days.
Dr. Snedden, in the book Understanding Kashmiris, you have also written about, there is a chapter about this Dogra dynasty, and you write about Pratap Singh, the third Dogra. So British feared that he might be working or a mole for the Russians. Yeah. And they did not adhere to the Treaty of Amritsar at that time, and they were started sort of ruling directly. Can you talk a bit about the relation between Pratap Singh and Russians?
Well, there were allegations that Pratap Singh had written to the Russians and said he wanted to engage diplomatically with them. There's also a school of thought thinks that those correspondences were actually fraudulent. Who knows? But what was clear was that Pratap's younger brother, Amar, was he didn't particularly like his elder brother. They competed for influence, and Amar was very happy to be involved with the British. So when the British effectively sidelined Pratap, it was Amar who took over, and it was Amar who was Hari Singh's father. And Hari Singh's son, Karan Singh, actually indicated to me once that he thought that maybe Amar had been poisoned by Pratap. Who knows? Which was why Karan was born in France, because Hari Singh may have been concerned about his son being poisoned by Pratap as well. I don't know, but certainly the sidelining of Pratap Singh enabled the British to do certain things in Kashmir, including re-establishing the Gilgit Agency, which they did because they were concerned about the Russians. So also at that stage, administratively and financially, Jammu and Kashmir was not in a good state, and the British were actually able to turn that around and improve the financial situation of Jammu and Kashmir and its administrative situation. And Pratap sort of went along with that, but over time eventually regained his throne. And during World War One, proved to be very loyal to the British. So it was a mixed relationship.
So I just want to understand from you about Mr. Nehru. Then after 47, I guess it started in 1946 only. Why was Nehru so obsessed with Kashmir? While on the other hand, Sardar Patel, as the history says, he had warned him, let go Kashmir because it would be a security risk for India in the future. Why was Nehru so obsessed with Kashmir? Why he wanted to keep Kashmir with India?
Well, I think there's two reasons, Daanish. One, perhaps more profoundly, was his forebears. His forebears were pundits, Kashmiri pundits, from Hindus from the Kashmir Valley, who'd migrated down south, initially to Delhi and then later on to Allahabad, now Priyaganj. And he felt this connection, I suppose, would be one way we could call it, with the Kashmir Valley. He loved that area, and on occasions, not very often because he was a very busy man, he would go up there for rest and recreation, and he just particularly liked that area. The second factor, though, was his friendship with Sheikh Abdullah, and they were what we in Australian parlance would call mates. They were very close, they were good friends, and politically saw things often in the same way. And there are two reasons why he was particularly interested in Kashmir. Perhaps a third one is their negative relationship with Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Nehru and Jinnah didn't really get on terribly well, and certainly Abdullah didn't particularly like Jinnah as well either. And Sheikh Abdullah was quite profound in one thing. He thought that if Jammu and Kashmir joined Pakistan, they would be subjected to feudal overlords. And that actually has been the case in Pakistan. The feudal landlords have been particularly powerful in Pakistan, and that would have been something that Jammu and Kashmir would have been subjected to. Remembering, of course, that Sheikh Abdullah very early on in his tenure as Prime Minister, as he was then, of Jammu and Kashmir, he and his colleagues undertook that very significant land reform in Jammu and Kashmir, which benefited a lot of peasants and various other people by giving them land.
Dr. Snedden, let me interject a bit. Landlord feudalism is okay, but culturally, religiously, traditionally, topographically, Kashmir was part of the other side. And Sheikh Abdullah still decides to go on this side. Do you think he has made a mistake?
Oh, I don't know.
Because the entire business, the entire communication of Kashmir were on the other side, not on this side. And still, Sheikh Abdullah again is the entire tide. And you know it better than me, Sheikh Abdullah did not hold Savi all across the Jammu and Kashmir state, except in the pockets of the valley.
Yeah, he was very popular in the valley, there's no doubt about
it.
Not
the entire valley, if I'm not wrong, but in the pockets of valley.
Well, how do we know? How do you know that, Daanish? There were no opinion polls taken in those days. There were no elections.
Exactly my point. There were no opinion polls. No election was ever held. How can we say Sheikh Abdullah was the only leader of Kashmir?
Well, tell me some other leaders then. Who were some of the other leaders at the time who could rival
him? Say maybe
him
Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas. He also had a good following in the Jammu part of the valley.
His problem was that he wasn't a Kashmiri. He didn't speak Kashmiri. He was a Jammuite, and he was, yes, in certain parts of Jammu province, particularly places like Poonch, Mirpur, maybe even Jammu city itself, he had some popularity. But in the Kashmir Valley, he didn't have the same degree of popularity as arguably Sheikh Abdullah
But
did.
Sheikh Abdullah was also not that popular in the Kashmir Valley, like we have made him to be,
How do you know that, Daanish?
because the history says so. If you see his 6 year administration rule, when he was the emergency administrative leader, how many he has put in jail?
Yeah,
He
but I
didn't
think,
allow the dissent.
yep. But I think in 1947, when there was this turmoil in the subcontinent as the British were withdrawing and British India was going to be partitioned and the princes had to decide to which state they would accede, Sheikh Abdullah was both, he was certainly influential, and I think he had a fair degree of popularity amongst the Kashmiris. He was probably, in fact, I think almost certainly, the highest profile ethnic Kashmiri leader in the Kashmir Valley. I can't think of any others who had the same degree of standing as he did. And the National Conference in those days was very popular, certainly in the Kashmir Valley. Elsewhere, not so popular. Maybe the
So,
Muslim Conference.
Dr. Snedden, I just want to understand one more thing. Why did he change Muslim conference to national conference in 38, 39?
Because he wanted it to be more secular. He perhaps had been influenced by Nehru towards secularism, and he wanted to make the party more inclusive. Remembering, of course, that 5% of the people of the Kashmir Valley were Hindus, and there was a small pocket of Sikhs in the Kashmir Valley too. But the people down south, there are a lot of Hindus in Jammu, particularly eastern Jammu, and Sikhs. And I think that's why he did it. He wanted to try and make the party more inclusive.
Dr. Snedden, he had put all his eggs into Nehru's basket. Do you think he had made a good choice by aligning Kashmir with India? Was it a
I don't
popular
think
choice?
I don't think he had put all of his eggs into Nehru's basket, which ended up being his problem because there was some evidence, and I've written another book, this one called Independent Kashmir, An Incomplete Aspiration, and there is some evidence to suggest that Abdullah was a little bit interested in independence, either for the Kashmir Valley or for all of Jammu and Kashmir. Probably more the former, the Kashmir Valley, which of course would have been very difficult because, as you suggested earlier, all of its links were with what ended up being Pakistan, and politically, New Delhi was very powerful there as well. So if it came to the choice though of India or Pakistan, yes, Abdullah said he didn't want to join Pakistan. He didn't. The Muslims in the Kashmir Valley did not feel insecure, according to Abdullah, the way that Muslims in India did, because the Muslims in the Kashmir Valley weren't a minority. They were 95% of the population. So they had a lot more self-confidence than Muslims in parts of India, where they were 20, 30% of the population, and lesser, depending on where they were. So, and he and his friendship with Nehru suggested to him, and on the other hand, his dislike of Jinnah, that India was the better place for Kashmiris to go to.
I sort of, Dr. Snedden, disagree with you on this
Oh,
as far
please
as
do. That's
as far
yes,
as
please
Mr.
do.
Shaifullah is concerned. But I again want to understand one more historical incident. If we read history, Hari Singh, the Maharaja of Kashmir, as well as Sheikh Abdullah, both sort of wanted an autonomous region for Jammu and Kashmir. If uh, both had sort of interjecting ideas, why did they fail to get on a consensus and bring sort of an autonomy? I'm not talking of autonomy like the special status or 370. But if you read Hari Singh, he had that idea of Dogristan. Sheikhullah also wanted an autonomy. Why couldn't they work together something out?
Well, it's very simple, really, isn't it, Danish? Hari Singh had jailed Sheikh Abdullah a number of times, and they didn't like each other particularly. And Hari Singh, he lost power in 1947. One of the worst things he could ever do was to vacillate, to not make an accession, because in doing that, he lost power and influence. And when he finally acceded to India, it was far too late, and he had become really very peripheral in the whole political process. Why didn't they work together? Because they had different aspirations. Sheikh Abdullah didn't want He might have been prepared to accept a constitutional monarchy, but he really didn't want Hari Singh to have very much power. And that as soon as Hari Singh acceded, Nehru made sure that Abdullah was the preeminent political person in Jammu and Kashmir. And concurrently, Hari Singh lost power to the extent that Sardar Patel said to Hari Singh, really, you've got to leave the state. And once Hari Singh left, that was the end of the equation. He never went back to Jammu and Kashmir. So they didn't have the same agenda in terms of either independence or even autonomy for Jammu and Kashmir. And Nehru was far more pro-Abdullah than he was Hari Singh. Remembering, of course, that in 1946, Hari Singh had not allowed Nehru to come into the valley to defend Sheikh Abdullah. He had imprisoned him on the border of Jammu and Kashmir and what would now be Pakistan, but India in those days, Kahala. He may have got slightly further, but they didn't get on terribly well either. And Nehru's analysis of the whole situation was very much tilted towards Kashmir. He totally negated Jammu as being of any significance whatsoever. And he didn't really have much of a feel for what was going on in Jammu either. And if anybody's been a bit of a loser out of this whole thing in 1947, it was the Jammuites. They were treated pretty cursorily by Nehru and also by Abdullah, I think.
Dr. Snedden, another historical incident which I would love that you talk about. What about the Jammu massacre? And why did Sheikh Abdullah fail to prevent it if he was the so-called leader of Jammu and Kashmir? And let me remind you, there were two waves under his command when Muslims in Jammu were massacred.
Yeah, and he did have some power then, but
he had all the powers, not some of the powers.
Well, you've got to put it into context, though, and remembering in 1947 when the second lot of massacres took place after the accession, they're still concerned in the valley with these Pakhtuns who were initially heading for Srinagar and got very close, and then with pushing them out of the valley. Remembering also the communications weren't as good as they are now. There was certainly no railway line the way there is now. There was a road blocked by snow at various times. And with the cooler weather coming in, that road became less passable. So there was that as well. The first lot of massacres, though, when I think most of the killings were done, and I don't know how many people were killed, there's some very loose figures about all of this. And a lot of people often quote that article in the Times saying 237,000 were killed, but there's another section thereafter that says or escaped to Pakistan. So we don't know how many were killed nor how many escaped to Pakistan. But there were certainly some killed, and it was terrible. He didn't have the influence or the standing or the ability to get to Jammu during the first period of those.
Did he allow it deliberately to happen?
I don't think he allowed it deliberately to happen. I don't think he had any control over what was happening in Jammu because he was in jail. He was in jail until September when he was released. So he had no.
My point remains valid that he was not the popular leader of Jammu and Kashmir that time.
He wasn't a popular leader of Jammu. I'll agree with that. But he was a popular leader of Kashmir. Maybe it was Chowdhury Ghulam Abbas who could have done something in Jammu, but he was also in jail until February.
Sheikh Abdullah did nothing to get him out of the jail to stop the Jammu massacre when he had the power.
That is certainly true.
So blame goes to Sheikh Abdullah.
No, I don't think it does. I think it goes to a whole heap of people. Sheikh Abdullah, yes, but I think he was highly distracted.
But Sheikh Abdullah could have stopped it.
Sheikh Abdullah
had not started it, but he could have stopped it. And he did deliberately nothing to stop it.
I don't know. Remembering Sheikh Abdullah had never been an administrator. Now, it's all right being a politician. It's a different set of experiences and expertise required to be an administrator. You have to issue orders, you have to develop policy, and so on and so forth. In the situation, which was essentially a war situation, they were highly engaged trying to get these Indian troops into the Kashmir Valley to get rid of these Pakhtuns. And it wasn't really until mid-November when they felt, I think, a degree of security. And some of these massacres after the accession took place early in November, possibly with the involvement of the Maharaja. And I say possibly because it's not confirmed. But I think they were just really heavily involved in what was going on in Kashmir. So whether he was, I don't know how he would have stopped it. How he didn't have any troops at his disposal because Kashmir didn't have any troops. They were all Dogras, and the Dogras, most of them were Dogras. There were some Gurkhas as well, but most of them were either destroyed by fighting the Pakhtuns and the Punchis and various others, or they were dispersed and unable to be unified as a force. They did do some law and order, but it would have been very difficult to stop. But maybe he could have done more.
Dr. Snedden, a leader who doesn't hold sway over any part of his country, how can he call himself a leader? And there are people who are getting killed, and he is unable to stop it. Irrespective of he had the army, irrespective of he had the police, irrespective of the weather conditions, irrespective of everything. But you are a leader. You call yourself a leader. You have gained access to the power, and you are still there and doing nothing, and the people are getting killed.
Well, let me ask you, what would you have done then if you had been Sheikh Abdullah in 1947?
I'm not the Sheikh Abdullah, not I had the power, I was there in 47. It's about the Sheikh Abdullah who has done nothing. Who allowed this killing? Let me be with Dr. Snedden. It's a fact. He has allowed it, irrespective of the fact about his shortcomings. You are not there. I was not there. The third person was not there, but Sheikh Abdullah was there. It's a fact. Come on.
Yeah, but you've done the analysis, so you must then also be able to say what could have been done. So what would you have done?
Dr. Snedden, let me put it in the other way. Did he visit Jammu around this time? I'm talking of 6th November to be very precise, because 6th November was the last wave of killing in Jammu. Did he visit Jammu on 6th November?
No,
that is the least a leader could have done. He could have visited the place.
Well, remember, right? How would you get to Jammu in 1947? There wasn't an airport.
He can get to Delhi, but he can't go to Jammu.
Yeah, because there was a flight.
He used to travel on that cart road when he used to stay at Banihal, then at Ramban. When he had his own power games, at that time he could go to Jammu. But when it came to saving the people, then there are hundreds of reasons why he couldn't travel to Jammu, right?
In 1947, though, the road, they hadn't put in the Banihal tunnel. The road between Jammu and Srinagar was very rudimentary. There were flights from Srinagar to Delhi. There was no
that rudimentary road, Sheikh Abdullah used to travel before that road to go to Jammu. He could have used the same means and methods to travel to Jammu, but he did not because he allowed it.
Well, look, Daanish, that's fine. I take your point, and maybe he could have done more. Maybe. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of obstacles to that.
Dr. Snedden, let's move forward. I again want to ask you about the tribal raids. Why did Pakistan allow this tribal raid to happen?
Partly to distract the Pakhtuns is one idea. Partly because Punchis had gone to the arms markets, places like Dara, and bought arms. They'd been disarmed, and then they went and bought these arms that continue to be made in Dara, up in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa area, northwest frontier area, as it was then. And they told stories to these Pakhtuns that they were being badly treated by the Maharaja, and that irked them, these Pakhtuns, and so they thought, well, we might go and help them. And also, I think, because they realised, the Pakistanis, that there was a lot of underhanded activity going on between the Indians and forces within Jammu and Kashmir, including the Maharaja and also Sheikh Abdullah, that the Maharaja was going to accede to India. Pakistan couldn't have done much about it, and they thought, well, let's go and capture the Kashmir Valley. And if they had of, it would have been very difficult for India to do very much about it, because in October the snows were about to start and they may have not been physically able to access the valley. So a whole variety of reasons. Now, whether Mr. Jinnah knew or not is in dispute, but certainly the Prime Minister, Liaquat Ali Khan, did know what was going on.
Isn't it a mistake on the part of Pakistan that they allowed this tribal raid to take place?
I think it was a big mistake, yeah.
It was a
And
big
really,
mistake.
if they were serious about helping the people who were being attacked in terms of the massacre of Muslims and all of those sort of things, they should have gone into Jammu, not into Kashmir. But much easier to get down the Jhelum Valley Road in those days to Kashmir than to get into Jammu, although they could have gone in through Mirpur. The road between Mirpur and Jhelum Town and those sort of places was quite accessible in those days, and they could have gone up from Sialkot to Jammu. It would have been quite easy, and it would have been very difficult for the Indians thereafter to get through those areas up to the Kashmir Valley. So I think strategically it was a mistake. Politically, I think it was also a mistake because India was able to take the moral high ground and say, the Maharaja acceded to us, and now partly because he was attacked, we said we'd support him if he acceded to us. And thereafter, they were able to put the total focus on the Kashmir Valley and forget about these massacres and the Punch uprising and all sorts of things. And that's what happened.
Let me bring another person in, that's Sardar Patel. Do you think he would have handled the situation quite differently than Nehru had he been given the power?
Well, he was the one who integrated all of the princely states into India. So he was in charge of the states. But Nehru took this one off Patel, partly because of Nehru's love for Jammu and Kashmir. And Patel was a realist. And before partition, Patel had said, all right, we'll take Hyderabad, you take Kashmir. And that's the end of the story. And that would have satisfied Patel. He's on record as having said that. And that would have been quite a reasonable solution. And as you mentioned earlier, Daanish, all of Jammu and Kashmir's economic links were with, almost all of them, were with areas that became part of Pakistan. And so logically, economically, that would have made sense. Patel was a very pragmatic politician, and he may have been able to do something different. But in terms of the accession, the documentation is there that shows that Patel was planning for the Pakhtun invasion. The Indians, although they said they only had sort of 24 hours to get their troops up to Srinagar, they knew that the Pakhtuns were coming, and he as defence minister, not as defence minister, but home minister, he got the defence minister, Baldev Singh, to do various things to make sure that the Indians were ready for when these Pakhtuns came. So maybe if he had have been in power earlier, yes, he would have done something about it. But once Nehru took it from him, that was the end of the equation. And then, of course, he tragically died.
Dr. Snedden, I also want to understand another historical fact. There are many scholars, Western scholars, just like Alistair Lamb, who sort of in his scholarly works negates the instrument of accession. He sort of says that this document, instrument of accession, neither has taken place nor the document exists. What are your views on such theory?
Well, the document does exist. There's now photostats of it that are out there on the internet and this, that, and the other. The date is when the issue is when did Hari Singh sign it? I actually think it's a very small issue because his intention, Hari Singh's intention by the 26th of October was clear. He wanted Jammu and Kashmir to join India. So it's an oral contract, if you like, that's later substantiated with a physical document. But it's pretty clear that by then Hari Singh wanted Jammu and Kashmir to join India, and that's the end of the equation.
So there is no doubt that this instrument of accession does exists, and Hari Singh has signed the document.
As far as I'm aware, it exists. I've seen photostats of it, yeah.
Dr. Snedden, my last 8 minutes left as my Zoom meeting is showing me. So my last question to you, and $1 million question. Since 1947, many documents, many resolution documents, the negotiation between the two, if I am not wrong, you have put figure at around 34 of sort of solutions have been put across to solve the Kashmir dispute. 34, I guess. Is that right number?
I don't know. I'd have to check.
Something like these sort of negotiations. What do you think is the way forward for Kashmir? How shall we, both the countries, the India and the Pakistan, shall solve the Kashmir issue?
Well, I have argued on more than one occasion that I think it's up to the people to decide. India and Pakistan.
People of Kashmir, Pakistan, or India?
No, people of Jammu and Kashmir. There's 7 regions within Jammu and Kashmir. 2 administered by Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu, Kashmir Valley, Ladakh administered by India, controlled by India, and Shaksgam and Aksai Chin under Chinese control. Not many people there, I don't believe. It's very hard to find information on both of those regions. But the other 3, they have legislative assemblies, they have elected representatives, or let them find another mechanism. But I think they're the only people really who are invested in this issue enough to be able to come up with a solution. India and Pakistan have shown over time that they're unable to do it or they're unwilling to do it. The United Nations Security Council has shown that it is impotent. India is not interested in a third party. And so there is provision within the Shimla Accord, which now, of course, Pakistan has abrogated, for it to be devolved to an agreed third party. So devolve it to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Let them decide if they want independence, if they want to join India, if they want to join Pakistan, if they want to be a UN condominium, if they want something else, Chinese control. Let them decide.
But Dr. Snedden, do you think that India and Pakistan would allow us to decide the future?
No, quite. The short answer is no, and the long answer is also no, unfortunately, Daanish. No, I don't think they do. They're very paternalistic. They want to control it. They think you have no say in the matter.
So in other words, you are saying that the people of Jammu and Kashmir are doomed for good?
Not
or
doomed,
is there
but
still hope left?
Well, there's always hope. We should never give up on hope. But unfortunately, yes, they have very little say in the matter. And now, we've just had elections on your side, and the Legislative Assembly really has very little power on the Indian side. Same on the Pakistan side to some extent. They're talking about making Gilgit-Baltistan a province, a provincial province, a provisional province until the Kashmir dispute's resolved. And Azad Kashmir has got a bit more autonomy since 2019, but it's pretty well under the control of the Pakistan government, particularly the army. So, yes, the people don't have a lot of say in their particular destiny, unfortunately.
Dr. Snedden, I'm terribly running out of time. Let me thank you and hold your book once again so that it reaches to maximum people. They buy it, read it, and understand about Kashmir. A pleasure talking to you, sir. And let me get your next book, The Independent Kashmir, and we will have another discussion with you.
Okay, Daanish. Thank you very much.
Please subscribe to our channel ROPORTAJ and press the bell icon to remain updated.